You're over-delivering. Everyone relies on you, and yet you're exhausted and no closer to the promotion or recognition you deserve. So many high-performing women hit burnout because they believe saying no will hurt their career. But here's the truth. Burnout isn't just a side effect. It's the thing holding you back. It's draining your strategic energy, your strategic thinking, eroding your executive presence, and keeping you invisible at the leadership table. So how do you go from burnout to thriving and finally land the promotion you've earned? That's exactly what I'm diving into in today's episode of Leading Women in Tech. You're leading, you're succeeding, and if you're honest, you're stretched way too thin. Maybe you're the team therapist, the person everyone leans on. You're a firm believer of the open door policy, but maybe that's just gone so far it's causing you problems. Maybe you're saying yes too often because that's what good leaders do, right? Or you're feeling guilty about delegating because what if it reflects badly on you? How do you own success if you delegated it? And what if it goes wrong and it still lands on you? And maybe you're just tired, beyond tired, in fact, not wanting to get up and go to work in the morning, dreading yet another meeting and loathing to do the work. That right there, that's burnout. Here's the truth. If you want to lead without burning out, boundaries aren't optional. They are the foundation of executive presence for women. They're critical if you want to be seen as ready for the next level. Because without boundaries, what often happens is this. You end up in the performance trap, constantly delivering, but not seen as strategic. You're trusted to do the work, but not tapped for that bigger opportunity. That gap, it's the gap between your performance and your potential promotion gap. It's one of the biggest reasons women aren't recognized at work. And today we're going to tackle it head on. I'm going to show you the signs to spot of leadership burnout, how to shift into high impact leadership that's sustainable, and how to set boundaries that earn you more respect, not less. And make sure you stay with me to the end because I've got a few scripts, 3 in fact, you can use this week. Yes, this very week that you're listening to this, I want you to go and draw a line without burning bridges. And I've got 3 scripts to make that super, super easy. So let's talk about why boundaries aren't just helpful, they're essential if you want to be seen as a leader and if you want to stay in leadership without sacrificing your well-being. We all know the world still puts gendered expectations on women, especially in the workplace. You're not just expected to lead the work, you're expected to manage team dynamics, smooth ruffled feathers, anticipate emotions, take on the invisible labor. I went deep on this in episode 254 of Leading Women in Tech. Go check out the show notes. It's called The Invisible Load. Leadership Shouldn't Cost Your Wellbeing. I'll link that in the show notes. And if you haven't listened to it, I really recommend checking it out because I went deep on this and what we tend to do as women that our male colleagues are not asked to do. So go check that one out. But the emotional weight we carry as women in leadership is real. And honestly, it's quite frankly exhausting and unfair. And that's where our boundaries can come in and help us. Without boundaries, it's easy to fall into what I call the performance trap. You keep saying yes, you keep delivering, and slowly you become the person who holds everything together, but isn't seen as strategic. You're indispensable to your team, but invisible to leadership. And here's the kicker. Doing more isn't going to get you promoted. Being as a strategic thinker does. This is exactly what happened to one of my clients. Let's call her Maya. Maya was the go-to fixer on her leadership team, always the one to just jump in. She handled it all, and she was extraordinary, don't get me wrong. But when it came to promotion time, she was told she didn't operate strategically enough. Why? Because no one saw her thinking. They only saw her doing. Her manager said to her before she came to work with me, "You're great at execution, but I haven't seen you think at that next level." That right there, the reason she came to work with me was performance versus perception gap in action. Brown boundaries change that for her because when you start leading with intention instead of urgency, you don't just preserve your energy, you elevate how people see you and actually how people see your team as well. That's how boundaries build executive presence. If you've been working harder and harder and wondering why you're still not tapped for the next step, this might be the reason why. It's not that you're not ready, it's that your executive presence is being undermined by your lack of boundaries. And I want to be clear here, boundaries aren't selfish. They are a leadership tool. They communicate that you know your role, your impact, and your value. They signal clarity, confidence, and executive mindset. And more importantly, they protect your energy so that you can show up as your best self. If you're hesitating to draw boundaries because you're afraid of letting someone down, being seen as difficult, or just not being the team player anymore, you're not alone. But that fear is keeping you stuck in overfunctioning mode. The women I work with who start drawing clear boundaries don't just recover their time, they start getting invited into strategic conversations that they weren't getting before. Their calendars shift from firefighting to visioning. Their presence shifts and their leadership notices. Burnout is not a badge of honor. It's a red flag that your leadership isn't sustainable and that you're going nowhere fast. If you're feeling like you're carrying the whole team on your back, what if the best thing you could do isn't to push through, but draw a line, take a step back, lead from a place of clarity instead of depletion? That's what boundaries allow you to do. So let's talk about what boundary problems actually look like. It's so funny saying boundary problems because my past life, working in supercomputing, I did a lot of stuff involving simulation of molecules, where boundary problems have a very different meaning. It's about how the molecules wrap around. That's the whole of the conversation. If you'd ever like to have that conversation with me, let me know. But this time we're talking about the boundary problems that are stopping you, that are stopping your chances, that are stopping people listening to you. And you may well already be in the thick of one of these. So here are 4 signs that your boundaries are a problem. Sign number 1. You're constantly firefighting and can't find time for strategy. You wake up with a plan, but by 9:17 in the morning, it's already blown up. You spend your day answering questions, solving problems, responding to just one quick thing. You want to think big picture, but the fires never stop. This is textbook overfunctioning at work, a red flag for both burnout and stalled career growth. Sign number 2, you feel resentful, but you say yes anyway. You say yes to the extra project, the meeting that could have ended in an email, the cleaning up someone else's mess and then quietly stewing about it. You might tell yourself, it's just easier if I do it. Or I should do that rather than because it's easier for me to do it, quicker for me to do it than to tell them how. But here's the truth. Resentment is actually a signal that a boundary has been crossed. And if it's happening a lot, it's not a one-off, it's a pattern. Let's name this. Women, especially high performers, are taught in our society, in our culture, that our worth is tied to how much we give. That saying yes makes us good, value, and yes, promotable. But no, that is not true. But it is no wonder when we've had that indoctrination that we feel that we can't say no without feeling guilty or even betraying somebody if we say no. But I want to reframe that for you. Boundaries aren't about withdrawing. They're about protecting your capacity to lead, to think clearly, to innovate, to have an impact. And that's what your organization actually needs from you. In fact, that's what they're probably paying you for if you've got a leadership title, is to have an impact. If you are just firefighting, I can guarantee that is not your job unless that's literally in your title. Sign number 3, that boundaries are a problem. You're the go-to person for everything, even the things that shouldn't be your job. You're the safe pair of hands. You're the person who always delivers. And somehow that means everything lands on your plate, from emotional support to tech issues to team drama. That might sound like credibility, but often it leads to career stagnation because you become essential for execution, but invisible in the rooms where strategy happens. And here's the kicker. The more you say yes, the more reliable you become, and the more you get bypassed through a promotion, because leaders don't promote doers. It promotes thinkers, delegators, decision makers. If you're carrying everyone else's load, you're not being seen as someone ready for strategic leadership. You're seen as someone essential to keep the ship running as it is. That's not going to get you anywhere anytime fast. Sign number 4. You feel responsible for everyone else's feelings, energy, or success. If someone's upset, you drop everything to help. If your team's underperforming, you blame yourself. If a colleague's having a bad day, you carry the weight. Here's the truth. This kind of emotional over-responsibility is one of the earliest symptoms of burnout, and left unchecked, it turns into full-on depletion, mentally, emotionally, and physically. And if you're the only woman in the room, you may be overcompensating for bias that no one else is even acknowledging. You say yes to avoid seeming unhelpful or not a team player, but in doing so, you're making yourself small, and it's not costing you time, it's costing you influence. Let's add one bonus sign. You're stuck and you don't know why. If you've hit a plateau in your career and you know you're capable of more, but nothing is shifting, you might be in what I call the performance trap, doing all the right things, but not seen as strategic enough to move forward. So as you reflect on those 5 signs that your boundaries are not functioning in a way that is serving you, ask yourself, when was the last time you said yes when you know you shouldn't have? What story did you ask yourself about why you had to say yes? Now ask yourself, am I stuck because I'm not capable, or because I'm too burned out and too essential to be seen as the leader who says no? These questions are where the real boundary work begins. If you're hearing yourself in one or all of these signs, don't panic. This isn't a diagnosis. It is an invitation. It's an invitation to do something about this, because you're not failing. You're just doing too much of the wrong kind of work, and we can fix that. Great news. You can shift this today. And we're going to talk about that right now. So let's reframe boundaries for what they really are. Not a rejection, but a redirection of your time, your energy, your focus towards what matters most. Because here's the real truth. Saying no isn't selfish. Let's say that one more time together. Say it with me. Saying no isn't selfish. It's a hallmark of your executive presence. Boundaries aren't about being difficult. They're not about checking out or doing less. There's a place for that. That's a whole other conversation for another day about zoning out so you can do your next thing. But instead, boundaries are about creating the space to think, to lead, to strategize, instead of just reacting. And this is one of the core differences between being seen as a doer and being seen as a leader. Most high-performing women who I work with who are staying stuck, not because they aren't skilled enough, but they're staying stuck because they're too in the weeds. They're too essential in the weeds, in fact, to be seen as strategic. In fact, they don't get promoted because their bosses are thinking, who's going to do the weed work? They haven't demonstrated they've got a team that can do the weed work without them, in fact. So if you want to build executive presence, to be the woman who's invited to those high stakes meetings, tap for promotion, seen as leadership material, when you need to start protecting your time, like the executives around you already do, but maybe you don't see them doing. Because what do most effective executives do? They guard their calendars. They time box their decision making. They say no more than they say yes. And they align their yes with their vision, not with what's urgent, convenient, or people pleasing. Boundaries are not a luxury. They're a visibility strategy. When you say no to what's not aligned, you make space to contribute more strategically. And that's what's going to get you noticed. You model sustainability for your team, and that's going to get you even more noticed. You show up with clarity and conviction in the moments that matter, and your team's going to show up with clarity and conviction in the moments that matter. That's what builds trust. That's what gets you noticed. It's what moves you from an overextended operator who's doing it all to that undeniable executive who should have had the title and the pay rise 6 months ago. This isn't just a leadership skill, it's a values-based leadership career path. And this is not a career path conversation anybody's going to have with you, because by the time you get to the point that this is really an issue, the people above you and around you, they might have the best of intentions, but they expect you to have figured this out. It is not an early career conversation where they're going to be like, you need to do this, and you need to do this, and you need to do this. They're going to be like, you're just not acting strategically enough, or you're lacking executive presence. They aren't going to tell you that just because you're overextended, that's the problem, but that means you're not showing up as the executive that you need to be. So here's the shift I want you to make today. Boundaries are executive mindset tools. Boundaries are high-performance habits for us as women. And boundaries are the checklist items that no one talks about on the executive presence checklist. This is why it drives me nuts when I hear women told, you need to work on your executive presence, because it's like, what does that mean? One of the big things it means is this. But no executive mentor is going to tell you that. But executive presence starts with boundaries. So how do you actually start setting boundaries at work, especially when everything feels urgent and important and like it has your name on it? The truth is, I don't want you to start by blowing everything up. That's not going to help you. And I think you know that, right? That's why a lot of the women I work with are reluctant to start doing this work. And we have to do a lot of mindset first. So start small, micro boundaries, small shifts, strategic shifts, new language patterns, and then you build the muscle of saying no with confidence. Here's the line I want you to take to heart. Saying no doesn't make you difficult. It makes you decisive, strategic, and a leader. Doesn't make you difficult. Really does not make you difficult. So let's start with some micro boundaries. These are small changes you can make today to reclaim your mental space and get some clearer signals going to others about how you work. I want you to turn off Slack and email notifications after 6 p.m. And in fact, my general opinion is we shouldn't have any notifications at all, even during the workday. I think they're just unhelpful distractions. You should have time, but absolute minimum, turn those notifications off during the workday. That's a red line. Have space outside of work, because that's when you recharge. And that's actually when you're thinking and solving problems. If you're constantly getting ping, 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 you have no space for thinking strategically. Number 2, use focus time calendar blocks and actually protect them. Without those notifications dinging every few minutes at you, you have to protect those blocks. And then redirect your energy from low value meetings. You do not need to attend a meeting if you don't offer value or you don't receive value. Now, there might be some politics involved in this, but all too often I hear somebody say to me, I can't go to that. I can't say no to going to that because, and actually when we dig into it, they think there's an issue, but actually when they approach the person who's running the meeting, 9 times out of 10, the person's like, oh yeah, you don't need to be there. We just put you on because we didn't want you to feel left out. And you're thinking, wow, I thought I had to go. So low value meetings, if you don't get value out of it and you're not giving value, let go of it, redirect it. If you need somebody to go from your team, delegate the hell out of that. And then the 4th thing I want you to start doing today, create a 24-hour buffer for non-urgent requests. This means you do not deal with things that come in unless they are literally on fire. You do not do that until you've had 24 hours. You wouldn't believe how many things don't need your attention if you just wait 24 hours. How much of your team just solves their own problems if you just wait 24 hours? How many peers, how many just other things just go away? Now, you don't need a formal policy for any of this. You just need to be consistent. And in all of this, language really matters. If you are in a high-stakes meeting or an emotionally loaded moment, you need the language that says, these are my boundaries. So here's how to say no without sounding like you're a bottleneck or a bad teammate. So first of all, that sounds important. Can I suggest someone better positioned to help? That is you delegating without guilt and empowering someone else. Or let me check my priorities and get back to you. That buys you time to think. It signals intentionality, but not resistance. And to give this the attention it deserves, I need to shift the timeline. It says you're balancing ownership with realism. These are so powerful and yet so simple. I want you to put them in your back pocket to start using this week. Head to the show notes. I'll make sure those 3 messages are in the show notes for you to start using today. And if you want to stop overfunctioning, remember we talked about that at the beginning, this overdoing everything, and reclaim your strategic energy, try these 3 tools. First of all, calendar boundaries. You need thinking time each week. It's not indulgent. It's where your best leadership is going to happen. Setting Slack and email filters. Decide when you respond and what requires your attention. Create a clear system, not an open inbox. Inbox 0 is great, but that doesn't mean you're in there all the time. Even better, have an executive assistant do this for you if you've got the luxury of that. Because if you have to train someone in a methodology to filter your inbox, they are so much more likely to fit to the rules than you are. And then tool number 3, decision-making frameworks. Before you say yes, ask yourself, is this aligned with my role and goals? Does this require me or could someone else own it? What am I saying no to if I say yes? I actually use this one all the time. I have the phrase I use in my team all the time. Being the CEO and the head coach of my company, I ask my team, does this really require my brain or my voice? If not, it doesn't need me. My brain, my voice, and my face, right? Because I'm the face of the company, I'm the head coach. So my brain is needed a lot. It's all of my IP. But if it doesn't need my brain, one of my team can figure it out. I am I'm too busy with coaching and doing all this kind of stuff to be solving other problems in my business. So before you say yes, ask yourself, does it really require me? Does it require my brain, my voice, or my face? Or could someone else own this? And then if I say yes to this, what am I giving up? These are executive filters. I use them as a CEO every day. I actually learned these as a tech executive myself, and they can help you hugely with influencing without being that aggressive person we're all nervous of becoming, because they work from intention, not reactivity. And one little favor to ask you before we continue with this episode. If this episode is resonating with you, can you do me a huge favor? Subscribe, leave a comment, a rating, review in your favorite podcast app, or a comment on YouTube. It really helps the algorithms, gets this conversation out there for more women in tech, and keeps us going strong as a show. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Now let's talk about guilt. You might be feeling some discomfort. That's normal. I certainly did when I started this work, especially because we've often been conditioned to be people pleasers and carry emotional labor. I certainly view myself as a recovering people pleaser. It's still there in the background. But this is where you can self-coach as a leader. Try asking yourself, why do I feel guilty? Am I being unreasonable or just unfamiliar with protecting my time? What would I tell someone on my team in this situation? That's how you start shifting your leadership mindset. That's how you stop being the fixer and start being the leader. So how do you actually start setting boundaries at work, especially when everything feels urgent, important, and like it has your name on it? The truth is, you don't start by blowing everything up. You start small, micro boundaries, strategic shifts, new language patterns that we've just been talking about. And when you build the muscle of saying no with confidence, and by that, I mean elegant confidence, not arrogant confidence. I mean confidence from this is the right decision for the business and my team, rather than I can't say no because of fear. Here's the line I want you to take to heart. Saying no does not make you difficult. It makes you a decisive strategic leader who's actually doing her job. So let's make this super simple. If you're feeling stuck, overextended, or just one email away from snapping, I want you to walk away from today's episode with 3 scripts that I'm going to go through right now that you can actually use this week to protect your time, reset expectations, and model powerful leadership. These aren't about saying no. They're about your executive presence, your influence, a high-performance habit sequence that shifts how others see you, because boundaries are how you become seen as strategic, not just nice or helpful. Script number 1, you're going to deflect and empower. How about, that sounds important. I'm probably not the best person to support this right now. Can I suggest, insert name, who's better positioned to help? This protects your time without sounding dismissive. It redirects with grace. It positions you as someone who's thinking about the bigger picture, not just herself. Script number 2, learn to use a strategic pause. Again, I've talked about this before, but it's worth reiterating. So you try something like, I'd love to support this, but I need to review my current priorities first. Can I circle back after I check where this fits? This works because sometimes the best boundary is a pause. The language intentionally shows you're shifting things and it's not avoiding. It gives you space to reflect and time to check if you're at the risk of burnout or overfunctioning. And then my third favorite script, I use clarity to reset. Try something like, to give this the time and focus it deserves, I'll need to shift the timeline or reprioritize something else. Can we look at that together? This is saying, I need a collaboration on this boundary. It shows your leadership maturity. You're not saying no, you're saying, let's do this right. This builds trust, executive presence, and signals that your time is both valuable and well managed. Try just one of these 3 scripts in the next 72 hours. 3 days, 1 script, just one. Pick the lowest stakes situation you can and notice what happens to your body, how the other person reacts and responds, what it feels like to reclaim that energy, because this is how it all starts. Not with a massive no, but with steady, powerful, strategic yes to you, to yourself. So are you going to deflect by saying, I'm not the best person? Are you going to pause and give yourself a boundary by saying, I need to review my priorities? Or are you going to slow down and get a clarity reset by collaboration? Remember, you are a high performer. You care. You're reliable. You get things done, even when it costs you. But here's the hard truth. Boundaries aren't optional if you want to lead long term. They're not just at all protect your energy. They're how you build your executive presence, your credibility at the leadership table, and the space you need for big picture thinking. So if you're not getting promoted, if you're feeling like you're doing all the work but not getting seen, if you're quietly burning out while holding everyone else together, it's time to ask yourself, are your boundaries part of the problem? If you want to find out exactly what's holding you back, head over to tonycollis.com/scorecard and take my Promotion Readiness Scorecard. It's a quick 2-3 minute multi-choice quiz that is going to give you some quick, powerful understanding of your gap. Is it strategic? Is it visibility related? Or like today, a boundary and an energy leak? Don't just guess this, get it diagnosed, because the promotion doesn't go to the person who works the hardest. I know it should do, but it doesn't. It goes to the person who's seen as ready, who's seen as strategic, who's seen as sustainable, and who's seen as high impact. So if this episode hit home, I want you to remember one more thing. Setting boundaries doesn't make you less committed. It makes you a more effective leader. So draw the line, say the thing, reclaim your time. And in case you need to hear it, you are allowed.